pleasure to speak with you.
You
First
as
things
well.
first, I just want to check in on you. How are you? How are you today?
I am doing fantastic. I just woke up not too long ago. I keep a late schedule, so ready to start the day.
Right. How late? How late are we talking?
Oh, it depends on how if I'm feeling inspired, I do most of my best writing at in the middle of the night. So I'll sometimes push it to 4 a.m. If it's a good night. I always let the music decide when I go to sleep.
So you're inspired in the middle of the dead of the night. Uh, have you ever investigated that as to why that might be specifically the case? Is there a tone? Is there a feel? Is it the quiet?
It's definitely nice that there's no things that can bother you. You can't hear a neighbor's car. It's just like absolute peace, and I can just really focus in on whatever I'm doing. Put some music on, sit in the dark, and just like 100% focus on the task. I think that's no distractions. That's when I really do the best work.
Oh, that's awesome. As well, considering this period of time, we're at post-release period now, have are things a little more relaxing for you right now?
Definitely, it's the whole album. It's been such a roller coaster of different phases. I kind of started this off just wanting to write music, and then ended up doing so much more with the production side of things and promotion now. Now that everything's actually finally out there, I can kind of on one hand take a load off, on the other hand, like, okay, now I can really focus on writing the second album. So it never really stops, but it just changes you know what the task is.
Of course. And right now, is that what's kind of keeping you busy, focusing on the future?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, obviously, doing interviews like this to promote the first album, getting to talk about what I've been working on for so long is really gratifying to do. But yeah, definitely think about the future and what the new music will bring as well.
Can't wait. But of course, as you said, we are here to talk about a specific album. It's been 1 week since the release of Epochs Changing. It's very early days, so while there are opinions out there and thoughts and feelings, we've still got some time until the dust settles on that. But based off the early general response, how have you found the response so far?
I think it's been overwhelmingly positive, which is just it's absolutely warmed my heart to see that people are enjoying the music as much as I've enjoyed making it.
Hmm.
And of course, the reactions to all the wonderful guest artists on the album. I think it's been a surprise to a lot of the fans of those artists that there's this other thing that some of their favorite people have been on. So it's been, I think, just really really great overall.
Yeah, I did. I tried to do as much digging as I could today to kind of almost find. Oh, let's see if I can find a negative review or someone that says they hate it for this specific reason or whatever. And it is actually really, really difficult to find, which is great, obviously.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy to hear that. I think if anything negative is said, it's usually that it's the music people it comes across as too complex for some people, which is totally reasonable. It's not the kind of stuff that you can put on in the background of a party. You have to sit down and listen to it. So, but
Well, it just depends
different
on the
music for
party,
different
doesn't
people
it?
in different situations.
Um, have you noticed a bit of a common theme amongst commentators and reviewers? So maybe like an aspect of the record that everyone seems to be picking up on.
Um, I think people are surprised by the variety of stuff. With especially looking at the guests I have. I think lots of people were expecting a very normal metal album,
Hmm.
but they of course branches off into more softer orchestral stuff and some synth stuff and some folk stuff. So I think people get in for a song from an artist they like, and then they end up listening to a song that's a completely different genre by the end of the album. I think that's the thing that's stuck with me the most is people are surprised that there's so much variety.
That makes a lot of sense to me because, of course, we like to place things in genres, and you're no different. Your music, this album is no different, being placed in a specific genre when it doesn't really apply. Particularly as you said, when you've got a wealth of artists working with who have all got different styles, it could never be that way. So it is, as you said, varied as hell, and that is exciting.
Yeah, it's fun. I think if you limit yourself to one genre, you're kind of doing music a disservice. I think some of the best music that's been made is when people mash things together from bands like Linkin Park to now the symphonic metal stuff, taking orchestral music and putting it together with metal. I think, put stuff together, see what happens. I think it's great.
You can only try, and hopefully something will catch. Did you have any expectations beforehand for this release? What I mean by that is a measure of success that you maybe wanted to reach.
I don't really measure success musically in terms of sales or anything like that. I definitely measured it in terms of I had an idea in my head of what I wanted this music to sound like, and I knew that it was going to take a lot of work to get it there, and it got to that point and then exceeded it. So that to me is absolute success. And if lots of people end up liking it, that's just a bonus.
And of course, a ton of money would be a little extra bonus as well. Help you,
Well,
pay for the future.
it certainly does help being well fed if I'm gonna be writing more music.
Absolutely, we should never
Absolutely. Yeah.
underplay that fact. It's just a shame that we both sit here and kind of make a like laugh at that concept that you could make enough money to eat and survive off it. But it just sucks that that's the way the industry is now.
Yeah, and it's such a hard industry to make money in nowadays, even if you are, very popular. There's so many different things taking the cut out of it. But one nice thing is being independent. Any money that gets made by the project, it's not going to a label. It just goes all back into the music again. So that's pretty helpful, I'd say.
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course, the flip side of that, obviously, it means you've got to do a lot of the work yourself. But if you're comfortable and happy to do that, then I guess it works nicely. And I suppose I have to ask that you do put a lot of work into not just obviously making this music, but promoting and pushing and trying to get it out there independently as much as possible. Are you able to balance that level of workload with, obviously having to do social media stuff as well and all of that with your personal life?
Yeah, it's kind of a new experience for me because I never really did social media personally before getting into music. I was just never into it. So
Hmm.
starting to do that as a way to, be able to interact and spread the word and do all that stuff. It's a learning experience. I think I've gotten a lot better at it since the music started releasing up to now. Now I'm actually starting to enjoy it too. As yeah, you can communicate cool stuff about the album is one of my favorite things. Like done some posts recently on like all the different instruments and a number of tracks and stuff on the album. So it's just fun to get creative with it and express parts of the music that you wouldn't hear, you wouldn't have on the album to see.
Well, that's fantastic, because it can be such a drag. So if you're finding aspects to enjoy,
Yeah,
well, that's the dream.
it's important. Yeah.
I've already said one of the most impressive things about this album is how varied it is. No two tracks sound the same, yet it is an album that flows together so well too. You can enjoy each track in isolation, I think, but listen to the full thing and you'll get so much more from it. To the point where I wondered, oh, you must have been conscious of finding the balance of being experimental and progressive and doing unusual things, but also having a certain level of accessibility. So, were you?
That's a really interesting question. Yeah. So like my background musically is I've always loved, prog bands like Dream Theater and then of course the symphonic bands, Nightwish, that kind of thing. Especially on the prog side, I always felt like a lot of those types of bands, people shy away from them because they feel like they're overly complicated. Like, I love listening to a 10-minute guitar solo, but a lot of people, it kind of overwhelms them. So when I started writing music, I didn't really intend to write anything specific, but I just kind of ended up writing stuff that's complicated, but it sounded good to my ear. I kind of learned how complicated it was later as I started to get more into music theory. It's like, oh, that's a weird time signature, but it didn't feel that way to me when I was writing it. And so I didn't set out to make it complicated. It just kind of ended up being interesting. And I think starting from the point of, okay, I just want this to sound good, and if it ends up being odd musically, then that's cool. Has kind of lended itself to that accessibility that you're talking about, where it's cool for a musician to see all the details, but it's also like you can listen to it without knowing anything about music theory and still get the whole picture.
Yeah, I'm always conscious of an experience like this can be taken in two ways. One, you can sit with a notepad and a pen and you can study it and you can learn, and through multiple listens, unpack a lot of different layers. You'll pick up stuff the more you listen to it anyway, of course. But I always
Yeah.
wonder about that first listen, that first time that you might just come across on, say, Spotify and a playlist or something like that, and what's the reaction going to be like there? That almost is as intriguing as the person who's heard it 10 or 20 times and what their thoughts are now. It's almost like you kind of want to get that person and get both points of view. What did you think the first time? What did you think the 20th time?
Yeah, and that's really interesting to me too, because I've talked to people on both ends of that spectrum, who have, been with me the whole every step of the way and have heard the music grow from being, me messing around with my guitar to being a full song, and the people who are just now listening for the first time. It is very interesting to hear those two perspectives. Yeah.
What? No, I was about to say what perspective do you value more, but I think you'd value both equally. Which perspective do you find more interesting at this point in your career?
Interesting. It's hard to pick one because it's always very gratifying for people to notice like the layers that you're talking about. Like there's a lot of stuff in the music that you won't hear until you've listened to many, many times. There's even some stuff that just because of the nature of how things get put together, it gets buried, and so you have to you know listen on like the instrumental version or something,
Oh,
which will be
yeah,
coming
yeah.
out soon. We're going to release those later. So that's always really fun for me to have somebody pick up on those details. But it's also been really nice just the surface level stuff. I wasn't intending to sing on this album initially,
Mm.
and it was actually Charlotte Wessels who convinced me to do it because I did the guide vocals for the album for everyone to learn their parts, and we were trying to find a male vocalist for Ever Shall We Roam, and I asked her if she had any ideas, and she said, "Well, who did the guy vocals? They sound really good." I'm like, "Well, I did them, but I'm not I'm not a great singer." She's like, "Oh, you sound great on that. Why don't you just sing it?" So I started taking sing lessons, like really trying to put my heart into the craft, and ended up singing a lot more than I thought I would. And so that surface level thing, going back to the question, is people have been giving me a lot of compliments on my singing, which I didn't expect because once again didn't consider myself a singer before this album. So that's been a really nice, just like, oh, I love your sing on that. You know, that's cool to
That's
hear too.
Yeah, it's that wonderful boost of confidence, isn't it? When you're not too sure yourself how you think it sounds, but everybody else can might be telling you it's amazing and it's brilliant, but you just can't get over that hump.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think liking the way you sound singing is one of the hardest hardest parts of the journey for any musician, or talking to, like, if you listen to recording yourself, it just sounds so weird at first.
Yeah, it's one of those you do get used to it eventually. Whether or not you ever truly love it is another thing.
Yeah, and maybe if you love it too much, that's a problem too, right? You got to have that little middle ground.
Fair point, fair point. You were talked into it. I mean, when you was it was your arm twisted quite heavily, or how open were you really when it came to singing? Was it simply the fact that you didn't believe you were good enough, but you were still happy to have a go?
Um, So I'd always kind of like sung casually, just like when I was writing the songs. When I
Yeah.
started off, I was just playing guitar and kind of writing lyrics and singing along the stuff. So I was always singing was a part of my writing from the
Hmm.
beginning. Um, as far as like thinking I was good enough, I'd never really tried, and it was very much like, okay, well, if I'm going to be getting all these amazing established musicians, why would I want to be performing? I feel like, okay, if my writing, my composing is good enough for their level for them to want to play on, I should just stick to that. And that was my philosophy at first, but then having Charlotte build me up like that, and I actually am very happy with how the singing turned out from my end too. So it was a cool process for sure.
Oh, yeah, you do sound fabulous on it, to the point
Thanks
that I
very
think
much.
it would surprise a lot of people to know that this isn't something you were necessarily comfortable to begin with. I think that really is will be the most surprising thing for a lot of new listeners.
Yeah, it's singing is one of those things where you can kind of get lucky with it. Versus a lot of instruments. Like my brother plays the violin, and it's like there's no way you're going to be a great violin player unless you've played it for 30 years.
Yeah.
Versus seeing some of that natural human stuff comes out sometimes, and you just have people who have never sang before who sound great. Of course, practicing is still very important and training all that stuff too. But I got lucky that it sounded pretty good with the work I put into it, so I'm pretty pleased with that.
What what you said you did some lessons. What did you kind of take? What did you get from that?
Mostly, like my pitch control and stuff like that was pretty good naturally, just from singing by myself all the time. I got a lot of the technique of how to like properly support the voice. Um, how to breathe was a huge one because I would naturally not take enough air in. So like learning how to feel like you're filling up your entire body with air so you can do long phrases and stuff and that kind of thing. And also learning how to relax my jaw and that whole system there because I was singing with a lot of tension at first. So that was probably the hardest thing for me was just getting this whole thing relaxed and learning how to stretch it and stuff. But
Worth it though. Clearly learned so much, right?
absolutely, and I got like a like an extra octave worth of range out of it too. So,
Amen. Hell,
uh,
amazing.
yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
Discovering, I mean, you're a musician, an artist, right? Every day in different ways, and particularly if you're either through lessons or just encouraged by people around you, you're gonna hopefully continue to learn and develop and grow every day, hopefully.
Absolutely, and I'm going to tie that into the band name. That's absolutely what Chasing Zeniths is about. Just always pushing for something new to learn, something it's a new level to reach. I really believe that as a musician, as a person, like you should never be like, okay, well I've mastered this, I'm done. Find something new to do or find a way to push that to the next level. Huge believer in
Yeah,
that.
well, it's not like we're short of things for you to continue to learn. As you say, you master a specific instrument. Just go try a new one
Yeah,
until yeah, yeah.
or make a new technique on it. I mean, we see people who are taking instruments that people have been playing for hundreds or thousands of years, and they're doing new things with them still.
Oh yes, yeah. So now I need to bring you. Well, we need to go back. We need to go back a ways to kind of really the earliest point of the new album, specifically really vision and how clear your initial vision was for this record. Did you have one, and was it clear?
Yeah, I didn't initially know that I was making an album about this, but as I continued to write songs, it became clear they were all kind of following a pattern, which is that they were all experiences from my life, things that I had gone through that, putting them into song, I felt like people could connect to, maybe take some inspiration from if they've gone through similar things. I think a lot of us go through similar challenges in our lives, even if they wear different masks. They're all kind of similar at the end of the day, and so we can kind of take solace in that, especially through music. If you find a song that you can really relate to, that's like a huge part of getting through tough times, at least for me. So that's kind of what Epochs Changing became was like the pieces of my journey along the way that got me to where I am. And all of a sudden, I had an album of that, and it's like full circle now for me to be able to have the songs that shaped me at the beginning all the way to the ones who are shaping me now, and it's like a tapestry of my life at this point.
Of a period in time that you can look on now, and perhaps some of them may not be as I guess as important as relevant as they once were for you, because obviously lives change and time moves forward, but it still summarizes a part of your life.
Yeah, it's just one part of the path. I think the last song Pathfinder really sums that up of how we're comparing it to like a journey through a forest. It's always every step of the way means something, and you got to make every step count, of course. And
It's
where
almost
you end up is just
presumptuous.
one part of the
Sorry.
path. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's almost presumptuous for me to say this, but I presume the creative process then was quite fulfilling for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of these songs I started writing, as a young man. Some of them date back all the way to when I was a teenager too. So it's like I've had my whole personal journey and musical journey through these songs. You know. So yeah, super fulfilling for sure.
Was it difficult though to kind of go back to the earlier stuff, the stuff that was raw and maybe say when you were younger and was focused in a different way, to go back to that and work on that and change that and adapt it to well, to your modern abilities?
Yeah, well, some songs didn't make it. You know, there's always the okay, that sounds a little bit too much like a, garage band kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was still messing around the guitar too much there, but other ones I was surprised absolutely did. Slipstream, I think, is the most popular song on the album currently. That was the first song I ever wrote. And it was just guitar and vocals initially. I went back and added the keyboards and everything else. But that song I feel like is just as relevant to me now, even though it was the first one. So I think bringing everything up to the standard of my current writing was, like I say, full circle. It was like really fun to do, and I think all of them still are relevant to me because of that.
Yeah, I think relevancy in your music is particularly important, and not just for yourself, obviously, and well, your development, but as you said, how everybody can, in some way or another, relate to either certain subject matters, even just a certain line, something, certain word that's being sung, depending upon who's doing it, and it's in every part of this album. It feels like you will feel something, you'll get something from it, at least once or twice. I think that's so important. Um, that inspiration, considering how clearly inspired you were, when you reflect on that and look back at that, do you feel like it was almost like a lightning in a bottle moment?
Yeah, I think all of my writing is lightning in the bottle moments.
Right.
I've gotten so many of my best ideas from dreams or just from randomly messing around and stumbling upon something, or I'll be writing in my digital audio workstation, and I'll move something off to the side and then end up accidentally stacking two things together, and it sounds great. I think the more you work with music, the more like they'll use the Bob Ross quote, happy little accidents start to happen. And that's always the most fun part when something just works so well and you don't even have to try. And then inverse of that, you have the 2 second section that takes a month to do because it just doesn't sound right. Uh, it's a give or take, but yeah, the lightning in the bottle, as you say, is definitely my favorite part of everything.
Do you feel like, you've got a nice balance that you do get those lightning in the bottle moments, and even if you do run into those head first wall moments where you can't quite move past a section, it works itself out eventually.
Yeah, and trusting that has been one of my biggest lessons on this process too. Like knowing, okay, it's okay to have a writer's block. It's okay to take time on something because it will happen, and it's happened before. You know, at least initially, there was always this fear in me that like, oh, I'm gonna lose it. I'm not gonna be able to figure this thing out. Like, okay, my creativity to hit a wall. You know, and that's what Albatross actually is about on the album. It's about that overcoming writer's block, trusting that you'll make it through it. Look, all the stuff you've already done. That's great.
You reach this stage where you're now comfortable knowing what your process is and that you just need to trust it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's important, for music and art, and also just in life, because we all hit roadblocks and stuff in whatever we're doing.
Of course, soon and as a creative, I mean, inevitably you will, whether you maybe don't, whether you want to, you will put some creative lines in the sand. Obviously, you've got some very experimental music, progressive music that certainly will have evolved over time. Early stages, did you have at any point um, where you needed to rein yourself in, where you thought, okay, this is maybe being a little bit too much, a little bit too crazy?
Um, I've certainly been told by people along the way that it's too crazy. I remember
Right.
getting early feedback that's like, oh, Unmoored Amnesia. It sounds like it should be like 5 or 6 songs. You should split it up. I'm like, no, I like I like it the way it is. Um, I don't think I ever. Sometimes when I write, I will overwrite and then trim. Especially writing drums, that's typically the way I like to do it.
Hmm.
And so that can sometimes be interesting, but I think overall, I kind of just let the songs write themselves. I get the idea in my head, and then I just try to put it down on paper as well as I can to reflect what it sounds like when I hear it in my head. So I rarely will try to influence the way the song turns out to make it more or less complex.
Okay. We've mentioned a few times, of course, you've worked with so many incredible musicians on this album.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, the absolute array of names and what they brought to this album is simply staggering. So for you, what was the most exciting part about working with these specific set of artists? And how many times did you kind of just sit back and go, bloody hell, that's good? Gobsmacked by what you were getting.
Oh man. Uh it's so hard to say a most exciting part because like I was fans of so many of these people's music before I was even starting to write music myself, before I even knew that I wanted to be a musician. So, I mean, as you said, gobsmacked, right? Having, getting an email with stems from, these incredible people, these incredible talents for something that I wrote was, it's just the most humbling thing you can experience, like it, and it was always just a massive excitement, and the back and forth too, working with Timo Summers is the one I worked with the most because he did the guitars on the entire album, so
Yeah.
that's just the workshopping of things and being able to talk on their level and they're talking on my level. It was just absolutely so gratifying. Um, all of them did I had had this idea for what I wanted for the songs, as far as like what type of performance and what type of voice. And all you can go off of is what those people have brought to the projects they've already been on.
Yeah.
But when you have, on something like the stuff that I've written, it's always different from the way their projects sound. So hearing the way they adapted their talents to this music and just absolutely connected with what the songs were about. Like each one, I always had a conversation like, here's what the lyrics mean, that kind of thing, and we went over it. And the way they brought out the emotions of the songs, like what I was feeling when I was writing them, it was absolutely incredible.
I love that you
Amazing experience.
summed it up that way because I also I'm not worried, that's the wrong word, but sometimes get concerned. You see a guest star, you see a guest vocalist, or whatever, on a track, and it might be a significant name, and you kind of know what they sound like and what they do in their own music. But as a guest, they end up kind of just bringing that over rather than sort of feeling part of this specific track. Whereas with your music and across it with so many different varied artists, the fact that it all fits with what you're doing rather than sounding like they're separate thing, I think was incredible. Must have been so much work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then the willingness to do things that were maybe not in their full comfort zone too. Like Vicky Sarakis, Unmourned Amnesia, I think is very much in her comfort zone for what she normally does with her projects. But Midnight Roses is very different from what she normally does. Bring out her softer side and but being equally excited to work on both was so fun to see stuff like that where I would get feedback like, okay, this part's going to take a different technique than what I usually do. I had to practice this thing up, and it's like, oh, that's awesome for me to hear. That someone at these people's level worked on something a little bit new.
Yeah.
And we all just learned something from the process at the end of the day. It was so cool.
And then they wanted to do it, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
like, oh, this is too much, and they were wanted to be part of this.
Yeah, that they were, these people all have that same, that chasing zeniths mindset. They all are constantly striving to perfect their craft just that much more. And it's such an inspiration to me to keep pushing my boundaries too.
Fantastic. It's wonderful that such collaborations can result in so many positive things, particularly as I imagine while we are talking from a very positive mindset, it also came with a ton of challenges. Trying to organize and get these collaborations going, I presume had moments of hair pulling stress. Did they?
Of course. I mean, the S word, in music is scheduling. That's always the number one because everyone has, usually multiple projects they're involved with and they're touring and they're writing new music. And when they're not doing all those things, they're, with their family for a week, with the time off, so before they go on their next tour, right? So it's like finding a time when people have the time and when they want to be doing music that they're not already doing music, is so hard. And then of course, yeah, even once you do have them, we're a long distance international project. You know, people stems are coming in from all different places, and they have to be, synced up and okay, if we make a change to something, is that going to mess up stuff that we've already recorded from somebody else? So it was there was a lot of challenge to it, but it was never like a oh, this isn't going to work kind of challenge. It was always just like, okay, well now we got to think a little bit differently. Or okay, we got to put that on hold while we do this, and then it'll come together later. And it always did.
Just a constant adaptation, evolving, just working with the situation you had.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Well, the end result speaks for itself, doesn't it? It's here, it's out, it's finished, it's spectacular. And I have to ask you then, of all the tracks on the album, what one are you first most proud of? And what one track do you think summarizes not just the album, but Chasing Zeniths in general?
I think my answer to both those questions is the same song. I definitely have to go with the instrumental intro, the Epochs Changing, the title track. That song, it's composed of pieces of all the other songs in the album, melodies and stuff, and has basically every instrument and synth tone on the album all packed into one. That song took longer to write than about half the album combined, just because of how dense it is. There's so many layers. Trying to incorporate every piece of the album into one song was a huge challenge, but it was so fun. And so when I look at that, I really feel like that is the summary of everything that I learned on the process. And so I'm
I'm glad you
definitely
said
proud of that.
I'm glad you said it was fun because I was about to ask you like why put yourself through that work? You could just do a 30-second, little guitar melody intro and that would be your intro. Why could but if it was fun, hey.
Yeah, yeah, just put like a weird synth sound and then go into the first song. Yeah, I like that kind of thing. It's the kind of the overture of the album. That having being able to sum everything up, it puts a nice bookend on everything. I am going to be doing that again for the second album. That's one of the main challenges that I'm working on, trying to plan for it as I write the second album songs. Be like, okay, well, this melody could be really cool, but it went in this direction on the song, so maybe I take it this direction for the intro song. I like doing that stuff. Yeah, it's super challenging, but it's fun.
It's like a reward for multiple listens because of course the first time you put this album on and you do it in order, you're not going to get that. You're just going to hear a very cool intro and you're going to hear all these wonderful sounds and these great instrumental moments and touches. But on a second listen and a third listen, you're thinking and you're hearing, wait, that sounds familiar, and so on. That's a reward. It's basically a small little Easter egg for to discover later on.
Yeah, I dig stuff like that. Going back to bands like Dream Theater with that they've had
Yeah.
albums with that they have the songs that carry over a story between multiple albums and stuff like that. So yeah, having that thing where you can dive in and you can really get this fun little detail out of it. I would love to make that an even bigger thing with the next album. Maybe do like a kind of musical scavenger hunt kind of thing. It's like how many references to the other songs in the album can people find in this one?
Oh
That'd be really
goodness me. You're already creating yourself an epic by the sound of it.
creating myself a nightmare, I think, especially once we get to
Um,
mixing that thing.
oh, for sure. But you've had you've got what you will have learned, right? No doubt from this album, um, just makes everything easier, right, going forward. The mistakes, the moments that worked well. When you reflect upon the entire process, I mean, we're talking from the very first note you laid down to like it being out. Do you are you positive? Do you feel good about it?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, I can't say like I wouldn't change things. There's some things I
Hmm.
definitely will do differently in the future. For example, we did the mixing long distance. A guy named Tom Mueller from Flatliner Studio in Germany did the mixing, and I produced it. Working back and forth with him. That was really difficult to do. Just sending a mix back and then listening. Okay, here's my list of feedback. So in the future, like I want to actually be in person to be able to do stuff like that. So there's things I would change with the way the album was put together, but the end result we got there, might have been more challenging than it needed to be in some places, but it came out absolutely the way I envisioned. So it's all good.
Yeah, it's all good. Speaking of which, then, what do you what do you hope listeners take away from the record?
You know, as kind of as we were talking, I hope that people are able to find something that reminds them either of something they've gotten through already, and thus shows them how far they've come, or something that reminds them of something they're going through now, or maybe will be going through in the future, and are able to use the music as a bit of a as a bit of a shield against that tide. It certainly helped me come to terms with things writing it, and I hope that people will get that same help from the music listening to it, or at the very least, hear some cool melodies and enjoy it. That works too.
Yeah, yeah. Enjoy it. If you can get something deeper from it, fantastic. But hell, if you just like it and enjoy it and want to move to it, headbang to it, just sway to it. That's
Yeah,
great
you
as
could say
well.
I don't understand the lyrics, but it sounds cool. That's great for me too.
Um, it's gonna be fascinating to see, as you say, we're only a week into it, 6 months down the line, to sort of see whether when the dust has settled on it, what the overall reaction has been. I suspect it's going to continue to be very, very positive. Um, and by that point, we'll be halfway into 2025 as well, and no
Yeah.
doubt, by the sound of it, you're going to be incredibly, incredibly busy. So I'm not going to ask you what's going on or what you're planning. What I want to ask you is a goal, specifically a realistic goal that you would perhaps like to achieve next year. Do you have one?
I think my goal next year is I want to get as much or hopefully all of the recording done for the second album. The writing is very much on the way to the point where once the holidays are done, I'm going to start trying to get some stuff laid down, and so that'll be the I think the main thing. Let's figure out who's going to be on the second album. I'm sure I'll be working with some of the same people again, maybe some new people as well. So get all that stuff figured out. It's always a lengthy process doing the recording stuff, but we'll get it going for hopefully a second album. I would love to get a second album out next year, but realistically, maybe the year after. But certainly some stuff for people to hear along the way as well.
That's all we need. To hear that you're going to be busy and to hear you've got plans and this is the focus. And if you get this done, that's great. But obviously, depending upon what's the business, the work that goes into it, we shall see. Either
Yeah,
way,
that's
it's
my
going to
you
be
know
very.
that's my realistic goal. I goal. Oh, let's get two albums out next year. Like I want to just go with it, but that'll be my realistic.
There's a reason why I use the word realistic.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You said the holidays. Do you plan to take some time off over Christmas? Kind of just step away from the music, just relax, enjoy that kind of period of time?
At anytime I'm really enjoying myself in a holiday or taking time off, I tend to get inspired and then I start writing stuff on my phone or
It
or
never
like, oh man, I
stops.
wish I was in the studio right now. So it almost becomes a vacation to me if I'm really inspired by the good vibes and all that stuff. So I'll take it as it comes. I won't be doing anything too strenuous over the holidays as far as the more work aspects of the production, but uh,
If
might be
if
writing some
that
stuff.
lightning strikes, you won't ignore it.
Absolutely. Eggnog is really good for composing too.
For sure. Epochs Changing. It is out now. That is so important to remind people you've got no excuse to not be able to hear this. It's there. It's available on all those wonderful streaming platforms and so on and so forth. And just got to keep an eye on your socials and everywhere that Chasing Zeniths is to see what comes next. Carl, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for doing this.
I really appreciate your time, Carl. This has been really fantastic.
Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to see more content like this, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It is gratefully appreciated. You can find us over at gbhbl.com, our full website where reviews, news and so much more goes up daily. We're also on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, at GBHBL. Just search for GBHBL and you will find us out there. We also have merchandise on sale. You can access the shop via the website.